All right, last we left off, Jefferson was not reelected into another term in the presidency, so that ended his 2 term limit there. James Madison had come into the presidency, and under Jefferson, we were experiencing some pushback to to the country as a whole. The British were kind of poking at the United States to see how much we really had grown, to see if we really were strong enough to stand up to them. But the British aren't the only ones who are going to be challenging the United States and seeing how far we would be able to be pushed. The Native Americans are also going to be pushing against the United States. We are going to see one of these conflicts come to a head against the Native Americans at Tippecanoe. So we have Tecumseh. Tecumseh was one of the leading figures in the Native American community. He had come up with the goal that if the different nations of Native Americans could come together, because there are numerous tribes of Native Americans within the United States. If they could unite in armed resistance to the settlers to the United States that were expanding onto their land, then they could preserve Native American culture. So Tecumseh was a huge threat because he's proposing this idea of a united resistance against the Americans. And the United States is very aware that Tecumseh is doing this, and they want to put down that threat. William Henry Harrison is going to be among those who is pushed by the government to go put down Tecumseh and his followers. That confrontation would take place in Prophetstown. When William Henry Harrison gets to Prophetstown and the conflict arises, they burn Prophetstown to the ground. The Native Americans are going to suffer heavy losses, but some escape to live another day. Tecumseh, the leader here, was actually not at Prophetstown when the conflict happens, but his brother is killed in the conflict at Prophetstown. He is one of the Native Americans that had died. Now, Tecumseh is going to put a curse on the presidency, and this is one of those conspiracy theories that I absolutely love in US history. Tecumseh's curse, we have seen it happen throughout history. He put a curse on every president that would be elected in the year ending with a zero. Kennedy, Lincoln, Reagan had been shot at, almost assassinated, but due to modern medicine, he was able to be saved. Um, we saw Bush in 2000. He actually choked on a pretzel and could have died, but because of modern medicine, he was saved. So Tecumseh's curse is something interesting that from this conflict here at Prophetstown, the death of his brother, he put on the presidency. And we'll see this come up as years pass, but it's something interesting in history. Look it up, ask me if you want more information on it. Tecumseh's curse. Moving forward, though, the threat of the British was still there. And in 1811, a group called the War Hawks is going to take control of Congress, meaning they have the majority in the House and in the Senate. These war hawks are going to push for war against the British. They're going to say, we need to make an example out of the British. They cannot continue to seize our ships. They cannot continue to take our men. They cannot continue to make us an embarrassment. We need to stand up for ourselves. President Madison also wants to push for war. And the reasons he wants to push for war is because he wants to stop the interference with our trade, because that's hurting our economy. He wants to stop British impressment, that taking of our ships, that forcing our men into their navy. And he wants to stop the Native American attacks in the West, which we believe could be connected to the British, who may be fueling the fire of the Native Americans a little bit. So we push into Canada. This was kind of a ridiculous attempt for the United States, but I can see where they were coming from. potentially. Canada had been, and it still is, a part of the British Empire. Now it's a little bit, their status is a little bit different. But Canada was a part of the British Empire, and we thought, okay, we could just attack our neighbor to the north. We could take Canada, and if we took Canada, then the British would leave us alone. That was a joke, because the U.S. are easily defeated in Canada, and we are pushed right back into the United States, and that got us into a bigger conflict than what we had originally anticipated. Andrew Jackson, a name that we need to keep in the back of our brain, was fighting against the Native Americans in a different part of the country. He was fighting against the Creek tribe in Alabama, and he was fighting against the Seminole tribe in Florida. Also in Florida was the Spanish, who still had control of that territory just south of us. But Jackson is going to defeat the Creek and the Seminole in Alabama and Florida, respectively, in 1814. So it's not all losses when we are pushing towards this war, Mr. Madison's War, or we call it the War of 1812 because it really kicked off in 1812. As the war continues, this was kind of the perfect time to fight the British. The British had also been fighting against Napoleon and trying to stop his attempts on the European side of things. But once Napoleon surrenders, the British focus is not divided between the United States and Napoleon anymore. It is solely on the United States, which was not what we wanted to happen. So the British are now focusing their fight against us after the surrender of Napoleon. And they want revenge. They want revenge for what we did at Canada. So the British are going to attempt to take Maine. They seize our capital. They burn the White House. President Madison actually left his wife at the White House, and he was in hiding, and she was there, kind of packing everything up, seeing them coming, and then getting out just in the nick of time before the White House was set on fire. This is their revenge. We tried to take Canada, they tried to take the White House. The British are defeated at Baltimore, though, and there at the time, people used to go and watch these battles. There would be onlookers to war because it was a very different style of fighting than it is right now. So you have Francis Scott Key, who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner while observing the U.S. victory at Fort McHenry, where we defeated the British in Baltimore. So the Star-Spangled Banner coming out of the War of 1812. At the war's end, the British are going to be defeated in New York, causing them to retreat to Canada. This would lead us into one of the greatest victories that we see in a different part of the country. In New Orleans, we have the U.S. victory in January of 1815. The terrible thing here, though, is that when we win in New Orleans in 1815, the battle came 2 weeks after we already signed the peace treaty between the U.S. and Great Britain. So that war is kind of thrown by the wayside because we signed the Treaty of Ghent in Belgium. The Treaty of Ghent is the peace treaty that ends the War of 1812, and it's kind of the silliest peace treaty we've ever seen. Because what it does is it establishes pre-war boundaries. So what it says is, okay, we're just going to go back to the way things were. Okay, then why did we fight a war? We set back up pre-war boundaries, so nobody gained more land, nobody lost any land. We just kind of call a truce. What we do set up is a commission for the future to settle disputes so that we don't just go to war. We talk things out. When I say the Treaty of Ghent is a little ridiculous, that's what I mean. They act as if the war never happened and all that's set up is some place for us to chat down the line. What we do see happening, though, is the nation is expanding. We are going to have states being added to the Union, states like Indiana, Mississippi, Illinois, Alabama, all of these territories becoming states under the help of the Northwest Ordinance in major part. We are going to see tensions beginning to build in Florida. Tensions are going to build between the U.S., the Seminole tribe, and the Spanish. The reason that these tensions keep building is because at this point, Florida is right below our cash crop states. Those cash crop states have large plantations. They are run with a large number of slaves. That is their labor. Slaves were escaping to Florida because it was a different country. The Spanish had control of Florida. So many slaves, instead of trying to make it, north or wherever they would go, they would try to make it to Florida because it was different. It wasn't the United States. And that's a problem because the South is losing parts of their labor force. They can't have that happening. So the United States is going to fight against Spain. We saw the conflict happening with the Seminole tribe. These are going to be the Seminole Wars in Florida. The Spanish are very weak at this time, though, so they cede or give Florida to the U.S. to avoid further conflict. We were going to need to fight the Spanish, but the Spanish didn't want to fight. They didn't have the power to do so. So they just give Florida to the US. But here's another story where you see European empires giving away land that really didn't belong to them. Because the land was not the Spanish to give. The land was the Seminole tribe's land. So that's why you're going to see the tensions increasing. And a big name that comes out of these Seminole Wars is going to be Andrew Jackson for his defeat of the Seminole tribe to kind of rein in this new territory that is now ours. Now, tonight for homework, you are going to read Jefferson's Decisions and kind of see how that came to fruition and how it had a hand in where we went with the War of 1812. Any questions on that, you let me know. Happy reading.